Okay, students, so we've looked at the damage that shells can actually create, but let's have a little talk now about the damage that bullets could create in the trenches. What we've got in front of us is we've got these two here are original First World War bullets that were definitely fired in the First World War. This one over here is actually from later on in the Second World War, but I'm just going to use that to show you kind of how a bullet works. And then these here, these are examples of the type of ammunition that the British fired in the Great War. So what we do first of all is we just have a look at this one. Now this is what we call a very large caliber bullet, and that means the size of the bullet. I'm just showing you this one. It's from the Second World War to give you an idea about how the bullet works. It's a bit like having a shell really. So what I can do here is if I take that off, that's the case, if you like. So this is where the gunpowder, or what was called cordite in the First World War, was in here. And again, that's the bullet. So it's just like the shell that we looked at, and that's the piece that flies off and can do an enormous amount of damage. So when that's in a rifle, that would be a very large rifle, then it's only this piece at the top, the actual bullet, then that would fly off and cause the damage. Then the case there would actually come out of the rifle itself. So that's just to show you how they work. That's a Second World War one. But what you'd look at now then is the British, they used a rifle called the Lee Enfield rifle. It was a very reliable rifle, and what that rifle could do is you could load it with 10 rounds of ammunition at a time. Now they came in 5s, and this is a clip, so this is an ammunition clip here. It's very easy just to take that ammunition out, and then you'd have to fill them up again by just pushing them in as you go, and then you've got 5 rounds of ammunition. So the gun could take 2 of these, and in the next video you'll actually see a chap firing one, and you see where he pushes the ammunition into his rifle and then takes the clip out again. So these are the types of ammunition that the British used. It was called the Lee Enfield .303 rifle, and this is the ammunition that they actually had. Now, in terms of what they carried with them, a British soldier was supposed to carry 150 rounds of ammunition, so 150 bullets of these. So what that would mean is that when he's actually moving around with that he would actually have probably 15 of these clips in one of his ammunition pouches and another 15 in another ammunition pouch. So he's carrying quite a lot of ammunition with him. When soldiers went into the trenches, they were always told to load their rifles up as if they might be attacked at any time. There's a lovely phrase that a man gave in a video a couple of lessons ago where he said, you put those 10 in and then you put 1 up the spout. And by saying 1 up the spout, he means you actually pull the bolt back on your rifle, so there's 1 in there ready to be fired if you're going to be attacked. So 1 up the spout is having a bullet or a piece of ammunition ready to actually fire. Okay, so that's the actual clip. So if you have a look here, so these are actually bullets that have actually been fired then, and if you look here you can clearly see where one of these would have sat originally just in to the piece of ammunition there, and that's the piece then that flies out and then would cause all the damage. So that's one there that's recovered from the battlefield. You can still find lots of them just lying around, and that's another piece there, and they've both come from Lee Enfield rifles. Okay. Now, there was a great fear in the trenches, particularly of being shot, but this was rather more by people who would be called snipers. So snipers were absolutely superb riflemen, and what they would do is they would have a rifle that would probably have a telescopic sight on the top, so something that you could look through, and what they would be doing is they would hide away in their trench. sometimes you'd have a piece of metal called a steel loophole, where you'd put that on the top of your frontline trench with a very small hole in it that you could actually open and close, and you'd poke your rifle through so that no one could shoot at you. Now, it's very, very clear that if you raise your head above the trenches, then it's very possible that someone is actually going to fire, yes, okay, one of these rather nasty things at you. And if you pop your head above the trench, then you could be receiving one of those through the head and it will kill you. So they were snipers. Both sides had snipers in the war. They came up with all sorts of weird but awful ways of getting men to pop their heads above the trench. There's one story about where the Germans used to make kites. When it was windy enough, on these kites, rather large kites, they write messages sort of insulting the British, saying how awful they were. And the idea was that they'd fly the kite up high and then the British would kind of lift their head a little bit out of the trench to read it. And that's when a sniper might pick you off. Now, the greatest fear, though, well beyond that of snipers, is if men were ever asked to attack. We'll be talking about this in the next lesson. This is called going over the top, so coming out of your frontline trench. Then, of course, both sides had machine guns. Now, machine guns actually used exactly the same ammunition. So they used the .303 ammunition, but of course machine guns could fire them at a much faster rate. So in the videos you'll watch in a moment, you'll see that British soldiers got very, very good at firing their rifles. But of course you had to keep reloading them once you'd fired 10 rounds. But machine guns could actually fire sometimes up to 600 of these in a minute. So 600 of these bullets flying through the air, and that's just from one machine gun. The ammunition was actually fired then on belts, and you'll see in the video next where the belt gets fed through the machine gun. And then what you would have there is you'd have up to 250 pieces of ammunition in one belt. It's rather a long job to actually feed the ammunition into the belt as you go, but you had machine guns as well. Short video is just going to come up just to review those points that we've made, and that will help you to fill in some sentences on your Google document. Okay, and another deadly part of the trenches would being hit by bullets. 3 possible ways that can happen. So first of all, you can be hit obviously with a bullet from a rifle. The rifles can often be fired in the trenches by snipers. And then finally, bullets can also be fired from machine guns in the trenches. 2 points about each. In terms of the British rifle, which is what you saw, then the British rifle was called a Lee Enfield rifle, and it could fire 10 rounds at a time, loaded 5 at a time. Snipers often protected themselves in the trenches, but they used telescopic sights on their rifles to make them more accurate. And sometimes they would have a steel plate in front of them with a hole, so a steel loophole to protect them when they're firing. And then finally, machine guns. The bullets would be loaded into belts, and a German machine gun could have as many as 250 rounds of ammunition on a belt, and that meant that you could fire sometimes up to 600 rounds of ammunition a minute.